Hey, this is a real pleasure to have Seth Davis here on. I mean, you see his good-looking mug there on CBS and TNT and TBS and Turner for the basketball tournament. Man, you're getting ready to start a crazy time right now, Seth.
It's you know what? Haven't worked a day in my life, Thom, as you know, and I'm not breaking my streak with this interview.
Amen. Amen. We're really grateful and appreciate your time. We were just talking a second ago there about some of the conversation about the play-in games in Dayton, because as you know, right across the river from Cincinnati here is Northern Kentucky. Just won the Horizon League Conference Tournament Championship last night. They're off to the NCAA tournament. Last year, the Horizon League champion wound up playing in Dayton, Wright State, where they won a game. There's been some chatter about maybe not asking those 16 seeds to play up there and have that thing loaded up with 11s and 12s. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, of course, first of all, we call it the opening round, not the play-in game.
Forgive me. Okay, all right, opening round.
And that is what it is. And by the way, you know, the financials of the NCAA tournament, Thom, I don't know how many people realize this, that for each game that a team plays, their conference gets what's called a unit, which is, I think it's a 7-figure payout over X number of years, maybe even higher than that. So it does give all those teams an opportunity to get an extra unit, particularly for those 16 seeds. That can really be very helpful. Look, you're a TV guy, so you understand how this business works. The idea that you're going to take instead of 4 potentially marquee teams. Remember, a couple of years ago, Michigan State and UCLA played in the round in the first 4. UCLA ended up going to the Final Four, which is actually quite interesting because people dismissed these games. I think 2012, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 2014 was the first year they had the first 4. We've had 2 teams go from the first 4 to the Final Four in VCU and UCLA. So this notion that they're irrelevant, I don't quite buy. But you're not going to take 8, quality brands, if you would, college basketball, try to make Tuesday and Wednesday better at the expense of Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It doesn't make much sense. I actually have advocated, most people don't follow my opinion, so it hasn't gotten any traction. Because people talk about, well, putting the at-larges in there. Or I've actually advocated, instead of having the 11 seeds play each other and the 16 seeds play each other, have the 11 play the 16 4 times. Because now you're getting 4 bites at the Cinderella apple. Do you have that intrigue of, the school from the smaller conference getting a chance to play in Michigan State or UCLA? So, look, these games I've been in studio working those nights. I'll be there again in Atlanta. I'm telling you, the games between the 16 seeds in the first 4 have been some of the best games in the tournament. That is their Super Bowl. There's the only games that are on at that time. They get a chance to play on Thursday or Friday, and the games are awesome.
I'm with you on that 11-16 thing. I love that idea. All right. We were talking, speaking of Cinderella stories, I mean, I'm not sure there's been a better one, VCU or UCLA included. And you just recently have a book out now about Sister Jean and that run by Loyola. It's called Wake Up with Purpose. Where did this idea come from? What made you think of it? We all saw her on television. You were there as part of the broadcast. But you're seeing her over and over and over and over again, but I don't think anybody ever got sick of her. How did this start, and then how did it finish? What was it like to do it?
Well, I've told her I want to finish it with her getting a bat mitzvah, so I'm still working on that. It came from my, addled brain as a writer, as an author. Sometimes people say to authors, like, how do you get your ideas? For me, I just have so many more ideas than time to write books. It obviously takes a long time to write a book, but it really just came from her. I didn't know her at all. And just thinking like, boy, I bet she's got a great story. She's been around a long time and not only has done some things, but, the wisdom that somebody accrues by being on the planet for that long was something that I really thought would be cool to tap into. But I got, too many other things. And it's just one of those things that just wouldn't let go of my head. So Porter Mosier was kind enough to put us in touch a couple of years ago. And, she'd been asked many times to write a book, and her answer was always the same. No, because I'm too busy. And she is very busy. But I guess I wore her down with my persistent charm. And I said, well, I said, all you got to do is talk, and I'll do the writing, and then we'll go over it. And once we got going, Thom, she loved, she's talking about things over the course of her life that she hasn't talked about in a very, very long time, or maybe even thought about in a very long time. So she enjoyed the reminiscences. She enjoyed the writing process. There's nothing this woman likes more than to have a big stack of paper in front of her so she can make corrections by hand on spelling and grammar and usage. She's very involved all the way through. She's 103, God bless her. And she's more mentally sharp and active than you or me or anybody that we know. So she's a real gift from God. And as I've said, I think we wrote a nice book, but the best part is I made a really good friend.
Yeah. That's always the best part indeed. All right, let's zero in here on a couple of things with the tournament. We start with Xavier. They lose Zach Fremantle for the final 9 games of the regular season. They continue to play very, very well. Had a couple of big wins on the road late inside the Big East Conference. But now they know he's not coming back. They had hoped he would. When you look at this Xavier team, they're the number 2 seed in the Big East Conference tournament. Knowing what we know now, no Fremantle the rest of the way, when you look at them, does it change where you might think about seeding them, or might some of that be dependent upon how they do in the Big East Conference tournament?
I would say both. I mean, it could certainly marginally affect their seed. The way this usually tends to work is if they have demonstrated that they are a different team or a significantly worse team without that player, then it's more likely to affect their seed. It doesn't affect us about whether they get in or not, and clearly they're by far in. So if they go, if they lose early, they lose to, Georgetown or DePaul or St. John's in their first game. I don't know who they're playing. Then I think the committee could say, well, it's not just that the loss brings them down, but this is kind of who they are. But they've played very well without him. I'm actually a little bit surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be knowing Sean, but I'm surprised they're playing as well as they are without him. I do think that, long-term for the tournament, personally, and I'm wrong, every few years about my predictions. Most of them, I have a very, very high percentage of my predictions coming true. Once in a while, I get something wrong. I would not anticipate Xavier making, a deep run without Fremantle. It's not just losing what he brings you, but it now becomes a depth issue. You have much less margin for error for injury, foul trouble, fatigue. Especially when you get into that second week, when you're talking about, even the first week, you're playing 2 tough games in 3 days. They don't do that during the regular season. And by the time you get there, everybody's gassed anyway. So, in some ways it might be better for them to go out early in the Big East tournament and just kind of, keep their legs fresh for the stretch run. But I'm disappointed mostly for Fremantle because he's a fantastic player and obviously wants to be out there right now.
Yeah. Kentucky, another team that has a huge following here in the greater Cincinnati area. Most people were writing them off 3-4 weeks ago. All of a sudden, Cal gets it going, starts telling everybody nobody wants to play us. I'm not sure anybody was buying that. There were probably a lot of teams that wanted to play them. I'm not so sure who wants to play them right now. Do you think that they are now a solid lock and they're playing for a better seed in the SEC tournament?
Well, they're definitely a lock for the NCAAs. The big question for me right now is Cason Wallace. Is he ready to go? I think one of the things that happened with Kentucky, and I try to say this sensitively, understanding we're talking about college kids, but they've had a couple of injuries to guys who I think actually helped because it forced Calipari to shorten his rotation. He's basically playing 5, maybe six guys. And he's got the right 5 in there. And it's really a defensive thing because when you have Cason Wallace, who's a freshman, Chris Livingston, who's a freshman, they're going to make freshman mistakes, particularly at the offensive end. But defensively, those guys really add a lot. They're big, long athletes. They're really hard to score against. And then I think that Calipari's, tinkered with how he's using Oscar Tshiebwe. He's bringing him away from the basket offensively. That's opening things up a little bit. So, they were able to win at Arkansas without Case and Wallace. Arkansas is a pretty good team. I mean, they struggled and they're young, injuries and blah blah blah. But Arkansas really needed to win that game, and it was in Bud Walton Arena, and Kentucky didn't have their starting point guard, and they didn't just win the game; they controlled the game. That tells you something about this team. I think they're mentally tough. I think they've been through a lot. I may have questioned this team and doubted this team. I have never for 1 second doubted John Calipari's coaching ability. I felt like the talent on this team wasn't as good as it's been, and they were young in some spots. And I do think that his blind spot, and maybe this isn't a bad blind spot, is that he cares so much about his players that he gives guys minutes that, frankly, they're not earning. And so the injuries forced that off the table. And they're playing well. I mean, no one going to be psyched to be seeing Kentucky against their favorite team in the bracket. I promise you that.
Well, you talk about guys getting minutes, and you wonder how much they deserve getting them. You're a Duke alum. You follow the ACC very closely. I'm not sure there has been a bigger disappointment, at least up till now, and you know where I'm going with this, is North Carolina. A year ago, they did not have a great regular season. They turn it on in the postseason. They get all the way to the national championship game, and basically you got a ton of dudes coming back, and it has not gone well. Does North Carolina have to win the tournament to get in? And then in addition to that, what do you make of what's gone on at North Carolina?
Well, first of all, I do think they have to win the ACC tournament to get in. If you look at their resume, I think right now they still only have one quad one win. A team like Wisconsin, last I checked, they have 6, it's just hard. And the problem is in the ACC tournament, it's not easy to get quad one wins because, a lot of the teams are not ranked high enough. I think if they win their first game, then they play Virginia. That's a quad one game. So if they lose that one, it's literally not a conversation. If they beat Virginia, then they would play either NC State or Clemson. And even though Clemson is the higher seed, Virginia is higher in the net. NC State is higher in the net, so that's the better opponent. So now you're up to 3 quad wins. I think they're 3-9 in quad one going into the final. And if they lose that, obviously if they win, it's not a conversation. If they lose that one, so I think it's tough. I would highly recommend winning the ACC tournament. As for what's gone wrong, first of all, I think all of us, myself included, really underestimated the role that Brady Manick played in their run to the championship game. If you recall, Thom, they were winning huge over Baylor in their second round game. I think they may have been up 24-26, right around there. Manick got ejected for a flagrant 2 foul at a certain point in the second half, and they ended up winning in overtime. So they blew a 20-plus point lead to Baylor just because Manick wasn't there. So they lost Manick, and they brought in this guy, Pete Nance, who's a transfer from Northwestern, kind of a similar big guy who can shoot stretch 4 mold, but he's not as good as Manick. He's just not. And so we very much underestimated that. And then look, I think the NCAA tournament is very capricious. You look at Caleb Love. He had 3 of the best halves that anyone's ever had in the history of that tournament. I think he's high 20s or 30 points. I think he scored 30 points in the second half against UCLA in the Sweet 16. And that was a close game. They were losing with 2 minutes to go. So they're down 2 minutes to go against UCLA. Then they get St. Peter's in the Elite Eight, which was kind of a freebie. And then, of course, they beat Duke and blew a big lead. So it's just they caught a little lightning in a bottle. And then now everybody back. Now you've got NIL. Now you've got agents. Now you've got people trying to – look, those guys don't come back if the NBA wants them. They're not coming back to win a championship for Old State U. So just hasn't worked. Just hasn't worked. They don't really have anyone on that team except maybe Leaky Black, who's their glue guy, non-shooter. They don't really have anyone who makes other guys better. Davis and Love are volume shooters, and they have a big guy in Baycott who needs the ball in the post, and they don't throw it in the post. So it's just been a tough season. It's been a perfect storm. And, we'll see what happens during the ACC tournament. But, at some point, Hubert Davis is doing some great work on the recruiting trail. They need to turn over this roster and start fresh. And at North Carolina, between the recruiting and the transfer portal, you can reload very quickly. And I believe in Hubert Davis. I think he's a good coach.
All right, last thing I want to ask you, as you look at these conference tournaments coming up over the weekend, is there one particular conference, one particular team or two you're really watching this weekend?
Well, one of the things that you watch for are the proverbial bid thieves, where you have a situation like in Conference USA, Florida Atlantic has sewn up, in my mind, an at-large bid. So if somebody else wins that league tournament, then that eats up an at-large bid for the North Carolinas, the Wisconsins, the Rutgers, Michigans of the world. And then I think also in the Mountain West could be anywhere from a 2-bid league to a 5-bid league with the at-larges. Probably ends up somewhere in between, but you have New Mexico in that conference. The conference tournament's being held in Las Vegas. Does UNLV make a run? UCLA is not at full strength in the Pac-12 without Jalen Clark. Does that open up something in the where Washington State could maybe do that and get the automatic bid, but would not otherwise qualify for an at-large? So that kind of trims the field. Aside from that, the mid-major conferences are so much fun to watch. I'm a big Oral Roberts guy. I'm telling everybody right now, I'm going to go in hard on them on the selection show. We'll see who they're matched up against. A team like Drake out of the Missouri Valley has sewn up their bid. Northern Kentucky in your area, Darren Horn getting that done again. So I would recommend to people, the power conference tournaments are fun and interesting and all that. Watch these mid-major, low-major tournament finals. You will see athletic effort, elation, and devastation in its purest form. It's really in many ways it's almost better than what happens next week. Although next week is just more, better, bigger every stage. So I know everybody's excited, and so am I.
Seth, we can't thank you enough for your time. I know you're getting ready to go catch a plane and get out of town. So thank you so much. I just love how you just so frequently, yet so elegantly and so kindly all the time remind people in the world of hate out there, of Twitter, to please be kind. You share that all the time. You're a kind man and just such a sweetheart of a guy. All the best to you and your family. Good luck in a tournament. Have some fun.
You just ruined my reputation, but I appreciate that. And the world needs more kindness, and I regret the times when I fail to meet that standard. But standards are good, and we should always strive. So Amen. I appreciate that.
Amen. All the best, Seth. Take care of yourself. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, pal.
All right. Seth Davis, kind enough to join us. What a good dude.